you do? Oh, today at school?
I feel very under.
Is Israel in your class? Yes. I love it. I see him every day at preschool. He's so cute.
That's okay. That's okay. The fifth grade level.
I'd like to call to order the September 25th, 2023 business meeting of the Ravenna School District Board of Education. Can we have a roll call?
Mrs. Calhoun?
Here.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Here.
Mrs. Dennison?
Here.
Mrs. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Tantamoni?
Here.
I'd also like to take this time to introduce our student board members of the month. We have Emily. And Emily, your last name, is it Mom? Okay, we'd like to welcome you from Ravenna High School, and then we have Cheyenne Foster from Brown Middle School. Welcome to the meeting. We'll talk with you a little later so we can get some feedback from you both. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could have a moment of silence. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any comments or discussions, questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Tantamonia?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes. Do we have anyone signed up to speak on on agenda items?
No, no one signed up.
Perfect. So now we will turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Hebert, for the Game Changer Awards recognition.
Thank you. So tonight we're starting the school year off with three game changers from our certified, classified, and district employees, followed by our game changers from the buildings. And we're going to start with our adults first. So if the Board of Education can go up to the stage, and then we'll get ready to call the people down or up, as it may be. You'll enter from that side, go across, and then come down on this side. And when we're done, we'll adjourn for a few minutes to take pictures. Okay, so first we're going to start with Mrs. Becky Klein from Transportation, one of our bus drivers. Come on, Mrs. Klein. Mrs. Klein is a driver who is a team player and willing to help by picking up students when we are short drivers or any time she's needed. She is a leader who is always willing to lend a hand to new or experienced drivers, for that matter, when working through the routes. She's the union leader who works with her constituents to help guide them through understanding the contract and to help make them better drivers. Sometimes she is a quiet voice in the wild winds of transportation. We do love and appreciate Becky Klein. Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Next, we have the dynamic duo of Renee D'Onofrio and Jen Browning, our school counselors from Ravenna High School. Well, we're not going to speak about them individually. We're going to speak about them as the dynamic duo. This team does an amazing job at making sure all of our students get the services they need. They keep the entire student population on track for their 3 E's goals, while all the while administering to the personal needs of our most at-risk students. They're always willing to work with staff concerns regarding scheduling and randomly checking up on kids when we voice our concerns. Most recently, they, along with the school administration, were responsible for an increase in graduation rate from 87 to almost 93%. Congratulations, Renee D'Onofrio and Jen Browning, RHS school counselors. Next, we have Officer Stephen Lincoln, our school resource officer, and Tucker, the therapy dog. Here he goes. Officer Lincoln dedicates himself to the safety and security of the students and faculty at the Ravenna schools. Not only that, along with Tucker, Officer Lincoln offers care and understanding to our students, especially when they are in crisis. Officer Lincoln is also present at many after-school events, including the back-to-school bash and varsity football games, and has built a positive rapport with many of our students. Tucker is as well known and as loved as Officer Lincoln. The staff are familiar with him, and he brings a smile instantly to everybody he interacts with. We have seen students lay down on the floor and kiss him and forget that they were mad. We are so excited to have Officer Lincoln and Tucker the therapy dog as part of our district employees. Thank you. All right, at this time, if we could have all the student game changers go over to the steps. Your principals will be there, so you just need to walk over there and stand by your principal. Don't worry. And we're going to do it from preschool on up. We'll start with preschool, go to kindergarten, etc. Okay, first from preschool is Camden Hillbrunner. Camden is safe in the classroom and playground. He shows respect to peers and adults and is always responsible. He has a contagious laugh and a bright smile, and we are all thankful that he shares those with us daily. Thank you, Camden. Camden's into the fist bumps. Next, from West Park Elementary, we have Briella Cottrell, who is in Mrs. Edwards' class. Briella is a kindergartner and is a game changer at West Park. She learned all the routines and procedures very quickly and is a wonderful example to all the other students in the classroom. She listens to directions well and always waits her turn. Briella is polite to all adults and kids in the school, and she's always in control. Briella is a good friend to others, and we are fortunate to have Briella in our school. Keep up the good work, Briella. Next, from West Main Elementary School, we have a third grader, Carter Kimbrot, nominated by his teacher. No? Did I miss somebody? I did, Jonathan. I need more practice with my reading. From Williard Elementary, we have Jonathan Brown, a first grader in Mrs. Blitz's room. Jonathan Brown is a, go ahead, big clap. Jonathan Brown is a one-of-a-kind kiddo. He is kind and considerate of his fellow classmates. I have seen him console, help, guide, and hug other students who are having difficult days. Jonathan is the first student to offer positive words to anyone, including his teacher. I am very impressed with Jonathan's acts of kindness. On top of all that, he is a hard worker in class and gets his work done. He's definitely a wonderful, caring, and loving boy. Anyone is and will be lucky to call Jonathan a friend. Congratulations, Jonathan. From West Main, we have Mr. Doherty. The West Main game changer is Carter Kimbrough. He could not be here tonight, but he's a game changer in the classroom, out of the classroom, and on the football field. Good job, Mr. Doherty. And he has great acting skills. Next, from Brown Middle School, we have Ella Vargo. Ella is a 7th grader who has made great strides this year as a leader. She is currently serving as a student ambassador and has taken this role very seriously. She helps to welcome new students at the building. She's just been named to be a member of the Superintendent's Student Advisory Group on Education, and she is an example of being respectful, responsible, and in control. Congratulations, Ella. Next, from Ravenna High School, we have Joseph Morvik, who is an 11th grader at the high school. An 11th grader currently being embarrassed by his school counselor. Joseph has a great personality. He's very quiet, but is very observant to everything happening around him, highly motivated, and always on task. After the bell rings, he goes around the room and pushes in any chairs that are out, tries to pick up anything on the tables or floors without ever being asked. He's very respectful to the teacher as well as those around him and is a joy to have in class. The next generation is in good hands if he is one of our leaders. Congratulations, Joseph Morvik. So for our first round of game changers, we had some great adults, great students. Now we're going, and great pets. Now we're going to go out to the main area and have pictures taken. So a short adjournment, and we'll come right back in for the business meeting.
So if we can have the treasurer's update.
Thank you. I wanted to put together some information now that we're back to school and kind of getting back in the swing of the fiscal year. If you recall back in June, at the end of June, our last meeting of the previous fiscal year, we passed an appropriation measure based on our estimated resources for this fiscal year, really to get us started. In June, we actually pass a permanent appropriation measure, but we are able to amend that at any time. So that gets us started for the fiscal year. July 1 is our new fiscal year, and in July, we finalize the previous fiscal year as well. So you'll see some final numbers from last year occurring in reports after July. In August, of course, preparing for back to school, we have a lot of staffing changes, new hires, new contracts are being loaded at different times for different employees. So that's kind of what our department focuses on in August. Finally, in September, then, we can sit down and take a good look at the budget. And that's what we've done this month, and that really prepares us for next month. Going into October, you'll see the presentation for the 5-year forecast. And then again, that's our roadmap for not only this fiscal year, but going forward, where if we need to make decisions about expenditures or about actions to take to bring our budget in line, we make those after we approve the October 5-year forecast. So I wanted you to kind of get an idea of where we were in the budget process, and then give you some numbers just to kind of get started for this fiscal year. So first, I did an update to the 5-year forecast with the fiscal year end numbers for fiscal 2023. So this slide shows you a comparison of our first forecast last October for 2023, the revenue we anticipated receiving, and then the expenditures we anticipated making. As you can tell, both came in higher than anticipated, but our over-under for the year, we knew we were not going to deficit spend last year, and we did not. But we did not hit our target, our initial target of the $536,000 over for last fiscal year. However, we did end the year with a cash balance. We had anticipated a cash balance of $1.5 million. We ended the year with $1.2 million. We estimate each year that we're going to have about $100,000 in unpaid orders at the end of the year, and that's a real hard one to gauge. So it's just a timing issue in a lot of cases, but we do have to carry those orders forward into the new fiscal year. So we anticipated about $100,000, and we put that in the forecast every year. This year it was a little over $400,000. And then our unreserved fund balance then includes those $444,000 in encumbrances or open orders that we haven't paid for yet. So essentially they get added to the new budget because we've carried over not only the expenses, but we've carried over that revenue. You'll see adjustments to the appropriation to account for those. Then you have the out years, right, fiscals 24, 25, 26, 27. And I made some adjustments to them based on those final numbers from 2023. So again, you'll see this in more detail in October when we've shored up the future years. But just putting them into last year's numbers and seeing where they are. So again, we know we will have a positive cash balance in 24, but that really goes down in 25. And then in 26 and 27, we know that we would have a negative cash balance if we didn't take any action to correct that. So in the next slide, I took a closer look at fiscal 24. So this is kind of an update with what we have right now for fiscal 24. So we have some new assumptions for revenue. the state has given us some simulations on the state foundation payments and some of the reimbursements we'll receive from the state. So with that in mind and some of those revised assumptions, it looks like we'll be getting about $1.1 million more than we had initially anticipated in our forecast. But also, looking at our expenditures and having a better idea of what our contracts are now, putting in some of those contracts for the new year, it looks like our expenses will also be going up about $1.6 million from our previous forecast. So where does that kind of fall in line? We still are not deficit spending. We should still receive more revenue this year than we spend, which is a good practice. It'll add to our already cash balance, but not as much as we had initially anticipated. So again, you see a cash balance of about $1.4 million. And that's pretty consistent with what the district's had in the past few years. But again, we'll have a better idea of what that looks like next month once we run all the assumptions on revenue and expenditures in the forecast. But I wanted to give you just kind of an update on where we are right now with the budget. The next slide gives you all the details of the fiscal 24 budget by function. So kind of our broad cost categories. Every expenditure that the district makes falls into one of these categories. The top tier starts with instructional functions, and as you can see, 57% of our expenses are direct instruction. So those are a lot of teachers' salaries, teachers' benefits, as well as their salaries, and then those direct school expenses, any supplies, materials that they're purchasing that go right into the classroom. But you see them broken down kind of elementary, middle, and high school. That's how the state tracks them. And then some other categories as well for special education instruction. And again, the state breaks that up with gifted instruction, K-6 instruction, 7-12 instruction, bilingual instruction. You see the preschool expenses there, but also keep in mind that our preschool is funded by state grant revenues that make up another almost $300,000 in addition to that. The next tier of expenses, 40% of our expenses in our budget are for support services. And so you see some of those support categories that they break down. Again, special education is one of your largest categories. So those supports, that's your guidance, your psychs, your nurses, any of your health services, your OTPT, and then those salaries and benefits as well as those contractual expenses. As well as the business office, so you see the board office expenses and those salaries, the fiscal department, our business operations, our maintenance in our buildings, our transportation department, and it's interesting if you look at the transportation services, Dr. Hebert and I were discussing that today, that $1.3 million, about $1 million of that is salaries, and that's including those vacancies. And then we have about 5 vacancies in there right now. And then $300,000 of that budget are non-personnel expenses, but again, about half of that is for fuel for our buses. So the actual expenses for our transportation department are really less than $150,000 a year. And that's all of the materials, supplies for our buses, tires, any maintenance equipment, any additional things like that. And then finally at the bottom of there, kind of the other expenses, we have an operational transfer in there for $100,000 that we put in our forecast each year for our athletic department that funds our athletic department, some salaries and their equipment and their costs, as well as the extracurricular activities. And those are not only your clubs and your supplemental stipends for club advisors, but that's also coaches. And that brings the total budget to just under $28 million this year. The next slide is what you're probably more familiar with seeing in the 5-year forecast when we break it down by budget category. And this really doesn't change much year over year. So over half of our expenses are direct salaries. Salaries, full-time contract employees, supplemental, overtime, sick leave, vacation time, that's all paid in that 55%. And the benefits piece of the pie as well stays fairly consistent. This year it's 26%, and that's your health insurance, your retirement, and workers' comp comes out of there as well. The services line is 13% of our budget. Those are our contracts, but that's also our utilities and support services. Materials and supplies is really a very small portion of our budget. Again, 3% for supplies for our classrooms, for our offices, for transportation parts, and the state also codes bus fuel as a supply, so it's part of that 3%. Our capital expenses are 1%, primarily because we purchase a lot of our capital expenses out of our permanent improvement funds. So that's a completely different fund. The forecast and the budget that we're looking at tonight is always on general funds. Our other expenses, again, that was our extracurricular costs. I'm sorry, no, that's actually our service fees when we pay the county or the state for administering our collections. And that transfer, that $100,000 doesn't even really register on our $28 million budget, so that's a zero. Finally, I like to conclude my presentations with the key takeaways. Again, just mentioning in the 23-24 revenue assumptions that there are some new state simulations on that fair school funding formula that show the district receiving some additional money. Despite our enrollment numbers at the state using averages going down, it looks like in the formula, because of the way they're funding more of the formula, we will be getting more money. And we'll talk through that again in more detail next month. And we'll also include some levy scenarios in there. The district does have a levy on the November ballot for about $2.6 million a year. That's 6.9 mils in our levy collections. So we'll take a look and see how that will impact our out years. Obviously, a levy passed in November of 2023 would begin collection in 2024. So we would actually get a half a collection in this fiscal year. So that would impact our forecast going forward. We may want to file an addendum to it, one of the optional forecasts, or we may want to wait until May and include that then. The expenditures by function and cost category, again, those don't change much from year to year, but it is worth diving into them to take a look at where our money is going in the event that we need to make some changes to that. If we need to make reductions somewhere, it's always important to see where's the largest piece of our pie. Finally, deficit spending and cash balance is always something we need to keep an eye on because, again, the state is tracking that. So that determines whether or not we're in fiscal watch or emergency. I will also want to mention that the Board Finance Committee is going to take a look at some additional budget information on Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the board conference room. We'll take a deep dive into budget as we have in the past. So now's kind of a good time to do that. We'll be meeting on Wednesday. The Superintendent's Citizens Budget Committee, they were to meet this month, but we had to postpone that to make sure everyone was available. Tuesday, October 17th at 5:30 in the community room, that meeting has been rescheduled. And then finally next month at this regular board meeting, we will discuss the 5-year forecast going forward and the assumptions for future years. Thanks.
Cindy, ask a question? Go back one or two. The special ed support right there. 2,000,003.
Yes.
I know you've only been here a year, so is there a way that you can look back a little bit? I'm wondering how much that's increased since Department DD has decided not to serve children. And we picked up a lot of kids there and a lot of expense there. I was just wondering how much that jumped up since they dropped out.
Yeah, sure, I can take a look at that and get those numbers for you. One of the things to consider, and I'll pull out those lines specifically, is how the state has treated some of those tuition numbers. So when we send students out of district, how the state counts those students now somewhere else. So I'll make sure that those, I'll make sure we're comparing apples to apples when we look at that.
Any other questions or comments? We'll move on to the superintendent's update.
Sure. My superintendent's update is really pretty brief tonight. I did have an opportunity to talk at Rotary last week about our increased scores on the state report card, our progress, and our momentum, which was received very well by the members of the Rotary. Mr. Tonamonio was talking about it earlier, but we are engaged in a battle of the buildings. We're in partnership with Leslie Keegan's I Empower Fitness Studios, and the buildings are competing with each other to see who can be the most fit. We're hoping to get 5 or so people from each building, and the board is part of the Carlin building. If you would care to participate, you can reach out to Leslie Keegan personally, or you can go through me. The board, so it's Carlin is one building with the board, the central office, and the preschool, and then each of the other buildings will be part of that building competition. I did meet with the Business Advisory Council last week. It was a great meeting. Out of it came a plan for a Champs Breakfast Series, so some of our most at-risk seniors will be matched with members of the Chamber of Commerce to learn about what opportunities are available other than college. I mean, college isn't necessarily always for every kid. So we want to provide them with some career opportunities that are outside of the college world or outside of enlistment, and the Chamber of Commerce is going to work with us on a breakfast series where we work with those kids throughout the year, every month. We also had multiple winners at the balloon affair this past week, 2 weeks ago. I'm sure Miss Burwell is proud of her Barbie float, but the high school had a pretty kickin' float as well. We came out with some grand marshals from awards from the elementary schools. So multiple winners. And then just to plug, homecoming is Friday and the homecoming dance is Saturday. So you want to come out and see us take on Coventry at the football game. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Reports of the board. We'll start with the Maplewood report from Mrs. Seaman.
Okay. The Maplewood total enrollment as of September 14th is 681 students from all the different Portage County schools that belong to Maplewood. Ravenna has 47 of those students, and the favorites for Ravenna students were cosmetology, and there are 7 students in the cosmetology department. There are 6 in early childhood, and there are 5 in HVAC and auto service tech. So those seem to be our Ravenna kids' favorite things that they want to be involved with. We did visit the information tech classroom, and afterwards we discussed all of the problems now with the cyber attacks and how important it is that the staff at every level needs to share the digital security, because it just can't be our tech people. It has to be everybody, and everybody has to be aware of what's going on so that they don't inadvertently end up bringing some kind of virus into our system. We also discussed the Ohio New Teacher Apprentice Program, which is Governor DeWine's plan to help address the teacher shortage. And He plans to do that by offering a pathway to become teachers to people who work in other positions within the school district. And they're going to add this occupation to the registered apprenticeships in Ohio. And he said, obviously, we have to train people in the high-level classroom management, because just because you supervise kids on the playground, or you read a story, or you assist teachers, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to control a classroom. So that's something new that they're trying out. I don't know if it's the best idea, but for schools that have a teacher shortage, it might be a good thing. Also, 7 members of the Maplewood Board attended the School Law Update Seminar, and some of the subjects that we discussed were rethinking your district's approach to student discipline, board policies that need review because of the recent legislative changes, how to bargain intelligently in 2024, don't get tripped up by due process when disciplining employees, sensible employee benefits for retaining employees, how to keep your vendor contracts legally compliant, what all administrators need to know about Section 504, understanding ethics and public contract restrictions. And I'm thinking, these are all things our superintendent has to know about, besides having all these other things on her plate, and I just think she does a fantastic job with everything. So after going to this, I really appreciate what you do, and I don't know how you get it all done.
Thanks.
Any questions? If we could have the Ravenna Parks and Recreation report from Mrs. Dennison.
No report this evening.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to reports of the treasurer.
Tonight you have board meeting minutes from the August regular business meeting, and then 2 special meetings held in September on the 7th and the 18th. You have a brief list of donations this month, various contributions to our Athletes of Honor donation for our race on August 19th, and then a generous donation from the Myers Appliance for the athletic department. The next item on the consent agenda are the financial reports for the month of August. You have a bank reconciliation, a financial cash summary report, monthly warrant list that shows you everything that we paid this month, and our budget status report. And then finally, the last item is just the then and now payment for Backupify Inc., which is a technology contract.
Can we have a motion to approve financial items A1 through 6?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion?
Yes, I was not here for the one meeting, and so those minutes, I don't know if I can vote on those or not.
So Robert's rule says that if you're absent, you can vote. You're not voting on the content of the minutes,
Okay.
you're just
All
voting.
right, thank you.
We can have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Tantamonia? Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
And then finally, the standalone item is the approval of the Reed Memorial Library rate resolution for budget year 2024.
Can we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Any questions or discussions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Tantamonia? Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes. We can have reports and recommendations of the superintendent and other administrators.
Thank you. Yes, I have a consent agenda first. The consent agenda covers Part A, 1 through 8. The first one is the annual responsibility of the board to approve the bus stops and the bus routes. The second is and the third actually, are to approve the memorandums of understanding between the REA and Union 338 that allows the teachers and the paraprofessionals to work their hours during the Monday through Thursday work week to accommodate professional development and meetings on Friday. I'm asking that you approve the resolution for a calamity day plan, which has been approved by our REA. This calamity plan would put online learning into effect if we were to go over 15 days of calamity. So that's a lot of days. I can't even remember the last time we missed 15 days. You did in Virginia all the time, but never up here. Nobody goes to school in the snow down there. Improving an overnight extended field trip from Brown Middle School for the 8th graders to travel to Washington, D.C. This is a return of a favorite field trip from before and gives an overall student experience that we believe kids need instructionally. We have used our grant funds to purchase 2 vans to help with our transportation efforts with our special ed students, especially the students that are now coming to us in wheelchairs from Happy Day. And without those, those grants really allowed us to get 2 great deals on some vans. We are asking that you approve a recommendation to use bus movers and more to handle an auction of miscellaneous school property items, and then an MOU with between us and the Kent City Schools where we would pay for the tutors of the Title I students that attend St. Pat's.
Can we have a motion to approve business recommendations A1 through 8?
So moved.
Can we have a second?
Second?
Any questions or discussion?
Just a comment. That plan was very well put together. So
Yes.
thank you,
Yes, it was.
Brown principal,
Yeah.
for putting that together. It was very well put together. It had all the pieces, all the questions I would ask. It had all those things covered. So thank you very much for putting that together.
That would be my only comment too. Somehow you squeezed everything into that trip. It's as if you've done it before. And then I wanted to ask, how long has it been since the middle school has done this?
We were the last class to go in 8th grade.
Okay, yeah, I knew
Just
it
a
had been
couple of years
while.
ago.
Yeah, it had been a long while. So again, thank you for taking this on and doing this for the kids. For a lot of the students, this will be one of the only trips like this that they have taken in their lifetime. So this is huge. The other question I have, the vans, do we have people to drive the vans?
Both vans were purchased with the design intent that they did not require a CDL, and so a van certificate is a much lower bar to achieve, and yes, we have people that can drive this.
Perfect. Any other questions or discussion? Can we have roll call?
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Tantamonia?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is personnel considerations. It's a consent agenda, Part A, 1 through 5. First is the employment of the resident educator mentor stipends. The state requires that teachers in years 1 through, 2 now, but it was years 1 through 4, participate in a mentoring program for resident educators. These are the teachers that will act as mentors for our teachers in that program. We are asking for the approval of the employment for after-school tutors, 2 different kinds. If you look at number 2 and number 3, one is for remediation of students who need help with certain content, and one is for the athletic study tables. The 4th one is for the employment of substitute teachers. We have a set of people there that are willing to come in and sub, as well as the improvement to approve the movement on the pay scale for certain teachers who moved up because they received, they move up because they have more education. It moves them on this pay scale.
Can we have a motion to approve personnel considerations A1 through 5?
Second?
Any questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Tantamonia?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Continuing with personnel of a sort, this is the consent agenda for supplementals. It's Part B, 1 through 3. The resignation of the detention monitor at the middle school, the employment of a drama club advisor at the high school, and the employment of the coaches for cheerleading, football, and cheerleading and football.
Can we have a motion to approve items B1 through 3?
So moved.
Any questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Tantamonia?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Finally, the consent agenda C1 through 3. The first is to accept a retirement from our last year's study hall monitor. She was part of the original package of RIF people. However, she is eligible for retirement through the SERS program, so we wanted to make sure that she was approved as a retiree versus a resignation or a RIF. We also are accepting the resignation of the secretary at West Main Elementary, who is moving on, as well as the employment of substitute employees. You can see different people in bus driver, bus aide. I have to say I'm pretty excited to see all the word bus in front of all of those people as substitutes.
Can we have a motion to approve items C1 through 3?
Second?
Any questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Tantamonia?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Continuing with the consent agenda 4 through 6, we are asking that you approve the resignation of food handler Paula Jones, the employment of food handler Carrie Andricott, and the employment of a substitute employee as a food handler, Tiff Kreitz.
Can we have a motion to approve items C4 through 6?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions or discussions?
I do think since this is food handling, Mr. Tanamonia
Yes.
needs, okay.
Yeah, so, and I also have a question.
Yeah.
I waited until the end. I just want to make sure, one of the things that we discussed when we were doing the work with the diversity task force was that we incorporate exit interviews into our process when it comes to the retention piece. And just reading some of these resignation letters, not only I want to make sure that we're following up, but that we are consistently doing those exit interviews.
We do the survey and offer the interview, but everybody gets the survey, and if they take us up on the interview, we interview them as well.
And then the resignations that contain something that
We
merits following up, we do that whether or not they request.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Can we have a roll call?
Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Mr. Tantamonia?
Am I allowed to vote on this?
No.
No.
I'm abstaining. then.
Do we have anyone signed up to speak on non-agenda items?
No, we do not.
Okay. Now we can speak to our student board members of the month. We have Emily Malm from the high school, I believe, right? And then Cheyenne Foster from the middle school. So we'll start with Emily, but if you would just tell us a little about yourself, some of your interests, any activities that you're involved in at school, or anything you would like for the board to know.
Yeah, my name is Emily Malm. I go to Ravenna High School. I'm a senior. I'm in chamber choir, yearbook. I participate in volunteering for the concession stands at the football games. I'm a student ambassador. I was one last year and I'm one this year. I'm the treasurer of the senior class and treasurer of Key Club. I really do enjoy this school very much. The school carries out a lot of opportunities for the students, and very grateful to attend this school. A lot of people do take it for granted, in my opinion, and don't see like the true light that it does give to people. Like, thanks to this school, I was able to go to Junior Cadet Week hosted by the Highway State Patrol, and was able to learn more and more about law enforcement. After school, I do plan on attending the U.S. Air Force Academy and becoming a space cadet.
Thank you. Cheyenne, can you tell us a little about yourself?
My name is Cheyenne Foster. I go to Brown Middle School, and I'm an 8th grader. I really like this school because, Brown Middle School, because it has a lot of opportunities as well for younger people and a wide, span of things to choose from, and it's nice to get to know everyone. And I plan on for the future to become either an athlete or someone influential. And outside of school, I do softball, and for this 8th grade year, I plan on doing basketball. And yeah, I really enjoy it.
Thank you. So both of you are in a pretty unique position. The board, as an advisory body, does not really get to talk to a lot of students. So most of the information we gather when it comes to the student experience is secondhand. But you're here with us tonight, not only on behalf of yourself, but on behalf of your peers. I just would like to take this opportunity to give you a chance to just share with us anything you would like the board to know, anything we can do better, things that we are doing good, things that we need to consider, or anything you would like for the board to hear about.
Yeah, do I have permission to speak?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Ravenna is a great school. The teachers are amazing. The staff is very helpful. But some of the students there are a little aggressive. There have been several fights this past school year already, and I feel like some of the students do get let off a little easily. Like a detention, they just view it as whatever, being suspended for a few days, depending on who threw the first punch. Like, some parents will take the students out to go get ice cream. But personally, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time last school year, and I got a severe concussion from it. And I still have major headaches, and I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. And the person who did that to me did get let off easily. So I don't really feel like it's fair to someone who was just minding their own business to still go through these things while the other person is still not being held accountable for what they did or for their actions. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking up and for sharing that. Just curious, how are you now? Do you still have long-term effects of the concussion?
Yeah, during the summer, I had my final concussion appointment, and they told me I have permanent headaches. I'll have them for the rest of my life, and as time goes on, they'll just continue to get worse. But there's really nothing more I can do about it other than just pay attention to my symptoms more, and if I have any further problems, just head to the doctors immediately. But me, I still managed to push through it, because a little setback like this shouldn't stop another person from being successful in what they want to do and accomplish in life, because I'm only still a senior in high school, and I still have a lot out there for me to do. So my goal here is just to address these problems do happen, and not a lot of people can overcome these not little things, but what I've gone through in a way, if that makes sense.
So if I can just tell you, as a senior in high school, for you to have the level of self-awareness that you have right now, and your ability to put things in perspective and not let something traumatic like what you went through change your whole outlook, that is very admirable and inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Cheyenne, is there anything you would like for the board to know, or anything you would like to share on your experience in the Ravenna City Schools?
I would like to say I agree very much with Emily on that part. There has been a lot of roundhouse during this year in the hallways, and
a lot of students not being like disciplined enough, and I believe that from what I see that there needs to be a bit more not letting off students and like letting them know what they're doing could affect other students and their like life at school, not make them feel safe, and that's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I just have one more question before I turn it over to the other board members. So Emily, your perspective is a little different now. You're a senior. You've seen a lot. You've been through a lot. Cheyenne in 8th grade has not had that same experience yet. What are a couple things that you would share with Cheyenne to help her along her way as she transitions into the high school next year?
I would honestly say just if an opportunity comes your way, don't take it for granted. Like, grasp it and like take it, because you'll regret it when you're like older. I would say just if someone in your life comes to you and they're not treating you fairly, or they're taking your compassion, your kindness for granted, just kick them out of your life, because they do not need to drag you down and hold you back from your full potential. I would also say just enjoy high school, have fun, get involved. If you don't get involved in school, it's just going to be boring. So I just highly recommend just putting yourself out there, taking the opportunities that this school will give you, and just being your own person and your own leader, but still being like humble and kind to others that come your way.
Wow.
So.
Before the others start with their questions, were these two selected, or are they always selected by the principals? Did you do? Awesome job. It was very nice talking to the two young ladies. So I'll open it up to the rest of the board.
Emily, I guess the question would be go to both of you. You both have been through COVID, the period of time when you didn't attend school. Do you still see a lot of difference, or should you see at all, difference between student behavior prior to COVID and past COVID?
I believe there is a difference from before COVID. Everyone was a bit more like, it felt more happy and not like, because I feel like COVID and quarantine allowed people to get involved with social media a lot more, which usually kind of damages or like takes effect on people's lives and mental behavior. So, and after quarantine, it just became a lot complicated, and people kind of, their behavior kind of got a bit altered, I feel, because of that whole situation. So, yes, thank you.
All right. Emily, can you add to that at all, or is that?
Yeah, I have to agree with her. I truly do see a difference in the before and after of COVID. Before, like whenever I was like in my like middle school years, there were like a lot of like, there was a lot of kindness in my old middle school. I used to live in New Mexico. Okay. But when COVID hit, it's just like everything kind of like froze in place. It was like time just stopped. And when we came back from quarantine, whenever I moved out here, I noticed like even in myself that like I wasn't as social as I used to be when I was in middle school, because like I was stuck inside for most of my 8th grade and freshman year, and it just took like a strain and like an effect on like my mental health too, with social media going through the roof, like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, like seeing all these influencers can really affect your mental health as well. And I noticed whenever I came here to Ravenna, how like not everyone is as social as like we all used to be when we were like in either middle school. Like talking to like the new friends I made along the way here, like they would tell me about their middle school days before they started high school, and they even notice it within themselves, like there's something off because of COVID. And I feel like it's because due to like how our brains are, how the mind works, we weren't raised in like a social setting, like in the most important parts of our lives, which is like the teenage years and throughout as you get older, like into the 20s, that's when like the mind fully like develops. So it just, I feel like that just like caused like some brain malfunctions, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Oh, just a comment, just listening to you all, you are wise beyond your years. And in spite of what you have experienced, you've chose to be positive and chose to go down that road. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again for joining us at the meeting tonight. We do have a few informational items. Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday, September the 27th. NEOEA Day, no school, Friday, October the 13th. The end of the first 9 weeks is coming up on Friday, October the 20th. And then the next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Monday, October the 23rd at 5:30 at the high school in the auditorium again. We do have need for executive session. An executive session or private session of the board is controlled by the Sunshine Law and may only be used for special purposes outlined in the law. No action can be taken by the Board of Education during executive session. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22, the Ravenna Board of Education will go into executive session for the sole purpose of the consideration of the following matters: employment.
We also need one for discipline.
And also discipline. Will there be any action after? No action after executive session. So can we have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Any discussion? Questions? Roll call?
Mr. Wisniewski?
Yes.
Mr. Tantamonia? Mrs. Seaman?
Yes.
Mrs. Dennison?
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun?
Yes.
Is interested in seeing the handouts from the lawyers, I have them here. The court cases are kind of interesting to read.